am Diane Lane Hymans from New York City, representing We Act for Environmental Justice with GGJ. Very pleased to be here with the summit delegates. We mainly deal in climate issues of food justice, also chemicals in not only the environment but in baby products, toys. There's not a facet that we don't deal with, including transportation issues, such as we just finished dedicating a clean air bus terminal. So there are a great many issues. I am very excited and gratified to be here at the summit with GGJ. I have been mostly focusing on climate change, women's issues, and food insecurity issues. And I hope to be able to join the delegation in Paris, and I'm just excited and pleased to be able to contribute to the work.
Can you share one experience or story about something that you've something here in the Cumbre or in the march?
Well, the march was truly wonderful to see so many people from so many different countries, but specifically to support the inhabitants of Peru in their quest for justice for their environmental theft. And a moving moment for me, well, one of them was with some of the women's groups, because in my household, the mother was the center of the universe, and these women whose husbands have been killed or jailed or must go out of the area in order to find work because they've been left out, and they're struggling so hard. And it's amazing how strong they are and how totally together they are. It's humbling, because I thought I came from a chain of extremely spiritual and strong women, but I'm taking lessons.
Yeah, my name's Tom Goldtooth, and I'm the director of the Indigenous Environmental Network, and we've been part of a coalition years ago in bringing together the voices of frontline communities that are involved in what we say struggle. We got to be very important in lifting up the struggle of our communities. As Indigenous Environmental Network, we bring our native, our indigenous people that are on the front line of feeling the reality of the expansion of a fossil fuel economy, all the way from Alaska to the tar sands and all the way to the United States. But we also have a link to indigenous peoples worldwide. So part of that kind of naturally came together on the formation of the Grassroots for Global Justice, and that's to really articulate, our issues by living in the belly of the beast, and be able to develop networks with brothers and sisters from the global south, and find where we have many things in common, and also to be able to debate those differences that we have. But what we found, especially around the issues of climate change and global warming, is that we have a lot in common as we join together to look at the issues of capitalism as the root cause of climate change. And we've been able to really redefine a lot of the focus of the big greens and corporations and the United States government and the big powers of the industrialized countries of the North, to be able to reframe that in a way that we have solutions as local communities to addressing the climate crisis, but also, you know, to develop that strategy, to develop the political will of basically humanity to really let's get together and let's build power and let's create a system that is conducive to the harmony of Mother Earth and build sustainable communities from our local perspective. One thing that's very important is we come together as communities from the United States within our networks of GGJ and IEN and the many other member organizations, is that to understand the relationship that we have in the reality of the United States, what it represents, and pushing economic globalization, pushing all these false solutions around capitalism and the power that the United States have here in the global south. And it's really important as we are able to understand that, to be able to build that relationship of common experience with the global south. And so, you know, we've been able to start to mobilize our place in more social movements and regional social movements of the world, especially around building power and fighting for a just transition away from fossil fuel economy, and these things are very important to us.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Ng and I'm part of the Chinese Progressive Association in San Francisco. And CPA is an organization that works mainly with the immigrant, working class, poor Chinese community in San Francisco, and we've been around for 42 years. And I think that why I'm here and why CPA relates to this work is that every day we're fighting to educate, empower, and organize our members to fight for a better environment. And environment from us is many things. Environmental justice is the idea that, you know, we can work, play, and just be in a safe and healthy environment. And that's what we're pushing for every day. And in terms of making sure that restaurant workers don't have to experience wage theft, or making sure that a hospital doesn't close down just because it's not making enough money, and making sure that, you know, people receive health care. So I think that in that way we're striving every day for environmental justice, and that's why I'm here. So I think one of the highlights that I've had here is to be able to be with and hear from the vibrant and fierce strength of indigenous leaders, especially women, from both the Global South and Global North countries. And I think it's very fierce for them to point out capitalism as the root of the problem without hesitation, and talk about false solutions, and really point it out, call it out when there's new forms of that. And I think it's so cool to see women who identify as feminists reclaiming spaces here in the Cumbre, where, you know, their voices have institutionally been excluded. So I think it's just so exciting.
So my name is Kali Akuno. I'm with the Cooperation Jackson and the Malcolm X Grassroots movement, both of which are member organizations within the Grassroots Global Justice Alliance. The work here at the People's Summit really relates to our work in a number of different ways. The key way, I think, and what we really came here is searching out others who are working on concrete alternatives for a just transition from the extractive economy, and more deeply, just transitions from the capitalist social framework, right, and social structure and social order, which is at the root of biodiversity, you know, destruction, ecocide, climate change. We have to create alternatives in the here and now. That's something that we in Jackson are really trying to take the lead on within our little corner and region of the United States, which is in Mississippi, building cooperatives, but not just building cooperatives as just simple enterprises, but making sure that we're trying to invest and create new forms of production that are based on zero waste, that are sustainable, that will be around for our children, our great-grandchildren's children, for them to enjoy. So we're not talking about just standard, just using oil and energy, which poses some challenges for us, but we're trying to figure it out. We know we have to do it in order to create a sustainable future. And so trying to learn, what others have kind of gained as experience, what they're pursuing, what fights they're engaging in to get them to that point, what are the strategies and tactics that they're using to advance their work. These are all things that we're trying to learn from others here, have learned from others here, and we're going to take back to Mississippi and the United States and teach others. Ooh, highlights. Several highlights. I mean, one, seeing the indigenous people here and the fire that they're bringing, the urgency that they're bringing, the message that they're bringing, particularly some of the women, and the stories that they've been telling, and the fight back that they're waging, on so many different levels. I think that is the main thing that I know I'm going to take back, that there are those who are kind of at the base level of what the extractive economy is, what the exploitative economy is, and they're really gearing up. The other highlight that I would really focus on was the march yesterday, the energy and the clarity of the message that that march really had. I mean, it was a contrast to what we just did with the People's Climate March in New York. The 400 people that our broad movement was able to turn out, I think, was a major breakthrough in the United States. One of the things that many of us criticized then and are definitely kind of criticizing now was that some of the harder edge message that really has to be heard and has to be told was absent from that particular march. Here, it's been front and center. And the clarity by which the social movement here is speaking about system change, I think, is a noted difference. And as many of our comrades have said, looking to Paris in 2015, that we can't take a step back. So from this point forward, the social movement have to be not only articulating the need for systems change, but really upping the ante, if you would, forcing the conversation, changing the conversation, and coming up with the alternatives to implement it on the grassroots level. So that really kind of urgency and that clarity of the message was something I think that should stand out to everyone who's going to be looking back at COP20 and wondering what the hell happened here, what was the contribution, if it didn't change the text that the UN was negotiating, what was accomplished. And I think that clarity from the social movements is the main thing that we all should be picking up on and taking back into our work.
So we've been here while the kind of resistance and actions have continued at the United States and cities across the country. Can you talk a little bit about, making connections between state violence and last night I was thinking about it in terms of environmental violence, and I looked it up, and there's a whole lot of writing about that I didn't know about. So the connection between the two and how we, people who, and then also people are in silos, but what's the importance of crossing when we're looking at racial justice and ecological justice and environmental justice?
Well, I mean, we've been African, indigenous, Chicano, Latino communities. We've been victims of every form of violence that you can think of, but environmental violence in the form of environmental racism has been central to that. That is what we've been calling it the past 20-something years, environmental racism. But in all honesty, it's environmental exploitation, and it's environmental violence and terror that's been waged against our communities. Dumping toxins in our communities, that's a form of long-term terror, because it's altering our ability to live, our ability to function. It's genocidal. So we've been experiencing that for a long time. It's been a central part of our struggle for a long time. As for this particular moment, I think we have to see it beyond the moment of what's going on in the United States in response to Eric Garner's death, Mike Brown's death, Von Derek Martin's death. I think it's a lot larger than that. And if we look at, I think, really what's been happening since Hurricane Katrina 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, there's the level of people's response has slowly been escalating. And you know, from what happened in Wisconsin to what happened in Occupy to now what's going on, the people's movement in the United States, I think, is really finding its legs, finding its way, and is responding to a number of different issues in kind, not just one particular issue. And I think that's encouraging. I think it's very encouraging to see not just, you know, black people, people of African descent responding to Mike Brown's murder, Eric Garner's murder by the police and the state violence. But there's been Asians, Latinos, white people out there in droves, you know, not just black people. And that's a critical shift and a very important one. And that so many people are agreeing with the tactic of shutting it down, really bringing business and you know, commerce and life, the comfort of American life to a halt, and saying, you know, it's going to have to get, you know, uneasy. You know, things are going to have to be shook up because we need system change. I think that's the clearest thing that's coming out from all this protest. That's not just about this focal point, but it's saying this is symptomatic. These 2 murders or 4 murders or 10 murders or every 28-hour murders, this is just symptomatic of the type of violence that is waged by the capitalist system against, you know, oppressed people, working people, and enough is enough. I think that is really what another generation is really waking up to and really starting to fight back. I think the question is, how do we sustain it, and how do we do it so it becomes much more strategic and impactful, and is really bringing about the change that we need and the change that we want, and that it's not kind of bought off or applied off or absorbed into something which negates the very thrust of the radical change that the demands and the protests are calling for. So I think the piece around, you know, another thing I think is interesting is that this has come kind of coincidentally, this whole report around what the CIA and all these other agencies of the United States government did in Iraq and other parts throughout the world, that just dropped. And that they, in some eyes, were trying to do it to be transparent, but what it really reveals is the nature, the brutal nature of U.S. imperialism, and just the whole aspect that they don't even care to hide their brutality anymore, as if they ever really did. But now it's just kind of in your face. Yeah, we did this. We'll apologize for some of it. But you know, the link is that type of brutality that was waged in Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya and, you know, now in Syria is no different than the types of terror that they wage, you know, in Los Angeles, in Oakland, in Philadelphia, in St. Louis, in New York City, in Chicago. It's committed mostly by the same forces with the same training and increasingly with the same weapons and tools. So, you know, it brings home that imperialism is not just an external phenomenon, it's an internal phenomenon directed at oppressed peoples, particularly African, Latino, and indigenous people in the United States. And I think people waking up to that, to resonating to that, and pushing back on it of all races and nationalities is a critical thing that's, you know, critical transformative thing that's happening in the United States that we have to ensure continues to grow.
I'm Sacagawea Saki Hall, and I'm with Cooperation Jackson and the Malcolm X Grassroots movement. Yesterday's march was really powerful. I kept thinking and reflecting on the fact that it was International Human Rights Day. For the last several years, I worked for a human rights organization and engaged more in the UN process and really thinking about how social justice movements in the United States can use the human rights framework. And so it was really hard for me to know the relevance of Human Rights Day, but be thinking about how little the United Nations is doing about this issue and so many other issues. And so the theme for this Human Rights Day was 365, Human Rights 365. And looking at the fact that human rights is not only one day, December 12th, but human rights, we have human rights every day, right? Human rights are universal, human rights are interdependent, we have them by the virtue of being human. But the United Nations in the process during this COP20 and COPs before doesn't show that. And so, although I think that civil society in some ways has benefited from the United Nations and tools and mechanisms that have come out of it, we also often are not only hindered, but it's in complete contradiction to the message that people are trying to get across, the message that social movements are trying to get across. And so I'm really, I guess, kind of rethinking, like, how do we actually, we can use the human rights frame. The human rights frame doesn't have to rest in the United Nations. And we know it doesn't rest in the United Nations where states are getting together and talking about how they can have an impact on climate. So I really wanted to still bring home, and I tweeted throughout the day and used the hashtag Human Rights 365 because we have to, I think, take that on and claim that this is a human right for us. It's a human right for us to breathe. It's a human right for us to have an education. It's a human right for us to have housing. And we're going to hold our states accountable and the UN process accountable as much as we need to. But we know that it can't stay there. It can't rest there. It has to be solutions that are coming out of our communities, solutions that are bottom up and not top down. And so that's my reflection on the march on December 10th.
So my name is Arturo Trejo. I am environmental justice organizer out of San Antonio, Texas for Southwest Workers Union.
Diana Lopez, I'm the director at Southwest Workers Union in San Antonio, Texas.
So can you start by saying, Diana, why are you here? Why is it important for you and your organization to be in Lima at this moment?
Sure, I think there's right now we're at a moment where we're seeing like a transition happening, where people are tired of going through the same thing. They're tired of violence, they're tired of destruction, they're tired of just, being hungry and tired all the time, right? So right now, the importance of being right now in Lima here at the People's Climate Summit is that we're talking about these solutions. We're talking about system change. We're talking about developing communities that are based on rights of Mother Earth, that are based on really like collective communities, that are based on really creating economies, creating spaces for people to thrive, and cultural spaces where people could live a good life, that's rewarding, that's with dignity, and that's with justice. And I think right now we're in that space. So coming from Latin America, a lot of our histories and a lot of our stories are based on social movements and the work that's happened in the past. So really being able to see some of these pieces and really be part of some of these struggles is very important to understanding sort of the future and where we could go as a movement within the United States, as well as understanding how the U.S. plays a role in the destruction of communities around the world. Coming from the belly of the beast, it's critical for us to understand and develop solidarity and alignment with communities that are affected by the country that we live in.
What struck me the most about my current trip here in Lima and listening to a lot of the testimonies and a lot of the experiences of hardship has been the desire and the continuity of collectivism and communities being at the peak of their ideas, where it comes to practicing, like I said, the word collectivism survival and their own world of like there's the outside world and there's them, and how they like continue though without being defeated. I think when I say we're defeated, I don't mean like corporates coming in and saying like we're taking everything from you. It's more like them how to continue their work, you know, like, and I think that's what was one of the things that I grasped the most of the whole trip, you know.
You know, really being able to hear some of the work around like agroecology, to hear some of the words from like very powerful indigenous women from the Americas is really being able to like take that and really being able to like, how do we take this back home? How do we create a movement within the U.S. that's tied globally, but that also, you know, brings people out in mass. Right now we're you know, right in, you know, the around like police brutality is very high right now. You know, and it's something that's always been happening, you know, within our community, but right now we're at a moment where people are like, you know, consciously they're starting to think about these things and they're starting to make these connections. So it's definitely important to be able to talk about, you know, funding, to be able to talk about, you know, agroecology. How do we feed ourselves? How do we govern ourselves? How do we create economic systems that are based on our people? And the work that's happening in Latin America and the words that people are speaking are very powerful, and they're living examples and solutions to climate change, and that's how we move forward with our communities is by doing these things on the ground, but being in solidarity and alignment with movements around the world that are fighting for liberation.
My name is James Burke. I'm an organizer with We Act for Environmental Justice in Harlem, in New York City. We're here as part of the Grassroots Global Justice Alliance. I'm here with one of our members, Diane Lane Hymans. And We Act for over 25 years has been working on environmental justice issues in northern Manhattan and beyond. One of the main issues that we've been fighting in the community is issues around air quality. Harlem and the South Bronx has some of the highest asthma rates in all of the United States, and a lot of that comes from emissions from transportation infrastructure. We have in northern Manhattan 6 bus depots located in northern Manhattan out of the 7 that are in the entire island of Manhattan. So We Act has been fighting these issues on the front lines for many years. We actually just opened the first green bus depot in northern Manhattan just a couple days ago. We formed a community task force, we organized, we pushed it, fought the MTA. So on the front lines we've been organizing, and also not just on transportation issues, but buildings. In New York City we're burning still very dirty oil, heating oil. So a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions from New York is coming from our buildings. And where are they building, or where are they burning the dirty number 6 oil? It's in low-income communities, it's in northern Manhattan, it's in Harlem, it's in the Bronx. So obviously we're fighting climate issues locally, but as part of coalitions and alliances like Grassroots Global Justice, we're here to represent New York, represent Harlem, and also be part of a broader climate justice movement, demanding that the United Nations, but most specifically that the United States, take action, because ultimately we are the main contributors of these problems and we have a lot of responsibility. So we're here to join other folks to represent the challenges we have in the city and push our leaders to take action. So I mean, New York City for a long time, I don't think folks were really feeling climate on the ground. There wasn't something that really, people woke up and the first thing they thought about was climate change, maybe housing issues or, economic issues, but after Hurricane Sandy, a lot of that has changed. Now you have communities in the Rockaways, you have communities in East Harlem and in Washington Heights and in Red Hook in Brooklyn, Coney Island, a lot of these communities really felt the impacts of climate change for the first time. Shortly after Hurricane Sandy, Wall Street was opening. Wall Street was open for business, but meanwhile you had public housing residents that were not able to go back home, people who were living in low-income communities that didn't have access to electricity, to hot water, to actually, just getting in their homes. And there were already things that were going on. There was mold, there was indoor environmental problems in people's homes already prior to Hurricane Sandy, but that exacerbated these problems. It exacerbated these environmental justice issues. So now in in New York City, I feel like a lot of the environmental justice groups are really starting to coalesce and form stronger bonds and work closer on the issues of climate. We had the big People's Climate March in September. There was a lot of organizing, a lot of outreach, a lot of education that was done, and now we really have to take action. So being here is a part of that. Yeah, We Act, and myself and our member from the community, Diane, we're here from We Act for Environmental Justice here in Lima to show the world, to show our allies that we're fighting in New York City, we're fighting in the United States, we're demanding our elected officials take action. It's not enough though, it's not enough. We're seeing the United States, continue to derail these negotiations. We're continuing to see the right and the Democrats and the progressives not do anything in the Congress, even in the state. In New York State, we just elected the quote-unquote progressive mayor. We had another election recently with Governor Cuomo. He hasn't taken a position on fracking. He hasn't taken a strong position on climate issues. So obviously we have to be in solidarity with groups around the world and around the United States. But we need to learn and hear from the struggles that folks are, dealing with all over the world and take it back and get the organizing going even stronger back in Harlem, back in New York, because our governor, our mayor, obviously our Congress, they're not doing anything. If anything, they're doing the opposite. And these are Democrats. Governor Cuomo is a Democrat who's potentially running for president in 2016. We have a former senator from New York, Senator Hillary Clinton, who's probably going to be the front runner in this next election. She supports fracking. She doesn't have a strong position on these international agreements. And so I think tying this all into what we're doing back home is extremely important, because we have a lot of responsibility, we have a lot of issues, and I think Superstorm Sandy really started to wake people up, really started to wake up the grassroots in New York, and especially communities of color and low income that were fighting these bus depots, that were fighting incinerators, that were fighting indoor environmental health problems and high asthma rates. And to tie all this in, now we have huge issues of gentrification and displacement. So as we green communities, as communities in New York are getting new parks, as they're getting new bike lanes, and they're getting, better at jobs and all this new, parks and all that, what's happening? People are getting displaced. People are getting kicked out. So in Harlem, We Act has been fighting for a long time to fight back against sewage treatment plants, fight back against bus depots, fight back against dirty heating oils, fight back on transportation cuts and service cuts to NYCHA, which is our public housing. But now when we're seeing the progressive governments try to now remedy some of these things, kind of what we're hearing now from around the world is with things like RED and other projects where people are being displaced. I'm seeing similarities with what's happening in New York City, where people who've been living in communities for generations, like Harlem, are now being displaced, and now new people are coming, and new environmental benefits are coming. But where were those benefits 20, 15, 10 years ago? They weren't there, and they were exacerbating these public health problems. So I'm hoping that today and throughout this whole process we can learn, we can hear from what's happening around the world and take that back to New York and just really build more support for fighting climate.